Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast. And at the end of the episode, we're going to recommend a brand new episode, and we're going to talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach. And this week we are talking about a show called The Dollop, where each week they talk about a weird moment from history. Comedians Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds will talk to each other about this, and usually Dave brings a story and tells it to Gareth, and
Gareth doesn't know anything about it.
And he just has to react. And boy, is there a lot to react to with the episode we are talking about today. It is called Zoo Man Cy Devry, and this is just I had heard about The Dollop a lot. It's a very popular show. People really enjoy it. But I'd never found one. I'd tried it before even. There was never one that really clicked with me. But I heard this episode and I was like, okay, we must talk about this story specifically. Kirk, what'd you think?
Oh God, it was great. And I love history. I love learning things without knowing or feeling like I'm learning things, learning things in a fun way, which is what this was. And these guys are very funny. Yeah,
I love being tricked into learning. That's my favorite way to learn.
I love being tricked. Exactly. I love being tricked into learning. That's my favorite. But no, and this guy, Cyrus Devry, is maybe one of the craziest dudes I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah, I've never really heard of anything like this. So they go into the whole story of Cy Devry, who is late 1800s, just a guy, and decides one day
Guy Devry
that he's going to take care of animals. And you may think, why do you think you're qualified for this? First of all, because it's the late 1800s, and basically saying that you're qualified is all it took, I guess.
Yeah, basically in the 1800s, no one was qualified for anything, ever, anywhere.
Yeah, and it was wild. But his main, I guess, point of here's why I'm good at is because he was a bull whacker for a really long time.
Whacked the bulls every morning.
As a child. Yeah, seriously, this show is really funny. And them bull whacker is apparently like a stagecoach, but not with a horse, so it's like bulls instead. They call them bull whackers. But they had some fun with the term bull whacker, as you can imagine.
Gareth is definitely okay. There was many bits throughout this whole thing where Gareth would hear something and then he would do voices, and it would just be ridiculous and over the top and hilarious. I loved every second of it.
Yeah, and it literally, I'm going to just start trying to go through this story because there's so many things that just are ridiculous. So he was a bull whacker as a kid, and then he was a mailman and was shot with a shotgun because this is, I guess, 1800s. They're like, who's that person on a horse?
Get off my lawn.
And they shot him. And they thought he was going to die, but he didn't. And that will be a recurring theme for Cy Devry. He refuses to die. Who knows why? Okay, I'll stop rhyming. Stop with the rhyming poetry. But at one point, he saw some swans. And he was like, look at those swans. They're beautiful. I want to have some swans.
It all started with swans.
And I think that he literally just talked them into this. He went to this was in Chicago. This was in Lincoln Park. And I actually looked this up. Lincoln Park Zoo was founded in 1868.
Crawling in my skin.
That's right at his time, and it is the fourth oldest zoo in North America, founded by Mr. Cy Devry.
Really? You said fourth oldest?
Yeah,
in all of North America.
Yes.
Nice.
And he did this because he saw some swans one time, and then wanted to set up what they called a menagerie, and you figure out in the course of this that there was a different connotation, or at least I think it was more just they put lipstick on a pig type thing where they're like, oh, we're not a menagerie. They don't take care of animals like we do. But there became this connotation for
we're a zoo
menagerie. Yeah. Of menagerie is oh, they just have a bear in a cage. We have a bear in a cage, but we also have guinea pigs over here.
Squirrels. We got 3 squirrels.
Yeah, it's there's so many things about this. They're so old timey and ridiculous that it blows your mind the whole time. They had squirrels. They had guinea pigs. They had apparently getting your first monkey was a huge moment because no, it was an elephant.
No, the elephant. Yeah, that's when you became a zoo. It's when you got your first elephant.
But yeah,
which, I mean, it did jump. It was like swans, a bear,
a couple guinea pigs,
elephant.
Yeah,
it was kind of a jump. It was like, okay, you got the swans here. We got 3 squirrels, some guinea pigs. Oh, and there's an elephant.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, this zoo, because originally it was just a park. It was just called Lincoln Park in Chicago, and he talked them into setting this up. He got it all set up, and now it's still a huge zoo. It also is one of the only zoos where you can go for free. It's a free admission, and then
to this day,
yeah. And
whoa, that's cool.
It's a cool legacy left by an insane person. So he gets the zoo set up basically, and then the ridiculous stories about Cy Devry start happening. This guy ends up becoming like a pop culture icon, sort of, for the time.
Apparently the media loved this dude, but they also hated him because there's multiple times where they would like just roast him, but then they were like, we miss him. And then, it's just this love-hate relationship with this guy. Mainly love, sometimes hate.
No, and I think there was a morbid curiosity there.
People were just bored in the 1800s and early 1900s. I just feel like people were bored because people are going to the zoo and fondling each other, and they're watching this dude almost get killed by animals, and they're watching him do surgery and stuff, and they're like, hopefully he'll die. Oh, dang, he didn't die today. Maybe tomorrow. It's just people are just bored. They're like, no one's going to get hung today, so there's no hangings for entertainment, so now we've got to go see it if the zookeeper dies by bear mauling. It's just, I don't know. It was a different time. It was just so weird.
There's a lot of that throughout this episode where it's funny because it's so ludicrous in today's current lens, to even look back on this time, because at one point they're like, a lot of this is based off of newspapers. A lot of the facts they're bringing is based off newspapers because he was so famous and he started getting famous. Seriously, we can't even begin to tell you about every single one of these animal encounters he had. But Cy sets up a zoo, and by zoo it means loosely cages at the beginning. It was caged animals, and he was, I guess, trying to be like Teddy Roosevelt, and so he was Mr. Tough Guy. And I actually have a picture of him.
Oh yes, I never saw a picture of him.
Very famous pictures of him with him snuggling a tiger. Or I guess it's a tiger. It kind of looks like a lion, but
this is what happens. He was definitely the first.
That link is terrible.
The first. Oh shoot! What's the dude name from Tiger King?
Yeah, no, that's literally what this is called. There's a Narratively article that I think they also mentioned in the Dollop that is literally Smokin' Cy Devry was the original Tiger King. So take a look at this, and that top picture is literally him just hanging out with the tiger, but you get an idea of what he looked like. Apparently he always had a cigar in his mouth, huge mustache, hat.
That's Joe Exotic right there.
Yeah, it pretty much is Joe Exotic, but dapper, old timey, masculine man, Joe Exotic.
I love him. There's a picture of him holding the orangutan, the baby orangutan. Also, that is the cutest baby orangutan. It's so cute.
Yep, it is adorable. But that's probably the one that was racist to Irish people.
There's so many stupid things.
This whole thing is riddled with problems of the time, so we're talking late 1800s.
Many.
Yeah, no, they at one point he kept going at women who would write to him about stuff. But
this dude was the original Twitter troll, dude. Because like Zach said, they named some orangutans after derogatory. They named it after they basically named it an Irish name, which apparently there was this racist connotation that Irish people look like monkeys is what they had said, and it was derogatory towards Irish people. And what does he do in the press conference? He's like, well, I don't care. Irish people look like monkeys. He's like, I agree.
Like,
what do you want me to say?
He's
like, I didn't name. I love how he's like, I didn't name the monkey, but Irish people do look like monkeys. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
this dude is the original Twitter troll.
Yeah, when he could have just backed off. But yeah, so he sets up essentially what is more zoo-like as he was doing this, so he started building out enclosures and spaces for them to be there, but all the while this guy was getting into ridiculous like media spectacles. So his first thing, they got him like famous and people figured out like, oh, we got a wild card here, was they called it the Battle of the Elks. Literally,
Battle of the Elks.
I think they called this, that was the title on like the newspaper. And back then, that was like the internet. That was the thing. It was just the newspaper. That's all there was. Battle of the Elks, Cy Devry. And what happened was they stuck a bunch of elks in an enclosure, and there was too many males in there. So they started fighting, and apparently they accidentally killed a doe somehow. So I guess it got serious. And Cy goes in there. And I think this is the one where he took in an iron rod at the beginning. But then he's like, the elks saw him and immediately both like changed their mind and went for him. And he's left. He's like, nope, we're going to redo this. But he ends up grabbing him and he literally goes in there and starts like just grabbing him. His move is he goes into the cage. He lassos him with a rope and then like, I guess hog ties him, like holds him down and everything so he can do his zoo work, because at some point,
they cut off their antlers so that they can't hurt each other anymore.
And I mean, it worked technically, but yeah, so that was his first thing is he gets in the cage with these rampaging elks. And then it just keeps happening. And also around this time, he wanted to differentiate from the menagerie. So he was like, this is a scientific establishment. We dissect every single animal that dies here. And it's like, that is not scientific.
That doesn't make it any better.
It's terrible, like what you're saying. That's the thing is you get a really conflicted feeling listening to this episode because some of it's horrifying, like animal rights, misogyny, like racism, all of it's horrifying, but it's so insane. It doesn't seem like reality. And it's like funny because it's what is happening this whole time.
Yeah. And this guy, I mean, this is a little bit jumping ahead, but he gets fired from the zoo like 4 times.
Yeah, multiple times.
Him and the board of directors of the zoo or whatever never see eye to eye. But the media loves him. And multiple times he will get fired. And then the media will throw such a hissy fit that they end up hiring him back because they're like, we're bored. We need to see someone almost die. There was literally a quote in I think it was in one of the magazines saying that this is the best zoo. And the reason it's the best zoo is because of Cy. Because at all these other zoos, the animals just sit there. Almost like what a zoo should be.
But at this zoo, around.
But at this zoo, there's always someone about to die. Animals are always getting out, and it's always entertaining. It's just like, that's not what a zoo is supposed to be.
No, but they loved it. Apparently, he performed. Well, he didn't even do it, but he had to. I guess there wasn't like tranq guns at the time, so like a tiger needed his tooth replaced. So Cy runs in there and like hog ties it. He like throws it, he lassos it, and like gets it over there. They like do this weird maneuver where they pull its feet through the thing so they can grab it and it won't kill anyone. And then apparently once the tooth was out and there was like 2,000 people there watching.
Because everyone was there because they wanted to see if he was going to get eaten by the freaking lion.
In the newspaper, just to give you an idea of like the time, and the newspaper's like, there were several hundred women at this event. It's like, what? Why is that a clarification? That's so weird. But after he pulls the lion's tooth out, and this is not, I don't think it was asleep, anything. They tied it to the side of the cage so they could do this. Cy stays in there and like tussles with the lion.
He played with the lion afterwards because like it is like Tiger King where he's just like rolling around with these animals.
Yeah,
half of them are like not tame, but like they're used to people being in there.
Yeah,
it's such a crazy.
So yeah,
my favorite story though is him and the bear. By far, that's my favorite story.
Well, it's it's clearly the stupidest one out of all of the stupid things that happen.
I don't know. The ostrich a little bit later is pretty crazy.
No, the ostrich is stupid in a different way. He wasn't personally in danger. This is more like, I'm a scientist. Stupid.
That's one of my favorite ones. So, but the bear story it's just so good. So he's outside the cage. I think he's like giving a tour or something.
Yeah, he was.
And this bear bites him his arm's a little too close to the cage, right?
No, he was trying to wake the bear up. So because
yes,
he's like, hey, bear,
that's what it was.
Do bear things. There's people here.
And so the bear bites him through the cage. What does he do? Okay, he's outside the cage. He gets bit. What does he do? He goes into the cage to then fight the bear. And it doesn't go well for a good bit. The bear apparently like bites a chunk out of his leg. It bites him in the forearm. It mangles his hand. I
think he lost part of his finger because of this.
It was so stupid. And then I think the bear had like a hold of his arm, and Cy punches the bear in the face, and the bear lets go. And the media write this giant story saying how Cy beat the bear. He didn't. He didn't beat the bear at all. Not even a little bit.
Cy ran out of the cage after being mauled by a bear. Like it was completely optional, and he chose this for himself.
He 100% got revenant there.
Yeah, I will never forget that scene. I saw that in theaters. But yeah, no, it's okay. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Okay, we'll talk about the ostrich suicide, and then we'll bullet point some of the other ridiculous things that happen. Because seriously,
there's just so many things.
Go listen to this episode. It is a nonstop crazy ride of like what is happening. So there was an ostrich, and there was a really tall bridge nearby. Apparently, the ostrich gets out. They chase the ostrich. And the ostrich, I think, and this is kind of like a sad story, honestly, they chase the ostrich around until he gets scared and it jumps off a bridge and drown. And it was apparently a really tall bridge. It was apparently known as the suicide bridge.
75 feet tall. So people would go there to commit suicide.
Yeah. And so this happened to an ostrich that was inside of Rye's care. And I guess
it's not funny, but it's so funny.
It's surreal funny. It makes no sense. But this happens, and Cy puts a piece in the paper saying that the ostrich committed suicide because the ostrich was sad because it lost its mate 4 months ago. And it's like, how insane is everyone here? What is happening in the world at this time? This is Chicago. This is like a huge city. Hugely prominent always through like this the country's history. And that's what was happening here is people were writing obituaries for an ostrich on like why it committed suicide
because it committed suicide out of sadness, had a broken heart.
Yeah, but so okay, after the ostrich suicide, he was fired again. He shot himself in the head and did not die.
He tried to commit suicide himself.
No, I think he tried to commit suicide because of the bear attack. Or no, was that a lion? He got bit in the hand very badly. I think it might have been a lion that time.
Oh yeah, that was. Yes, it was. No, I think it was it a tiger? Because it was one thing because he didn't like tigers. Remember? Because like later on they talk about it a little bit. He's like, I'll never go in a cage with a tiger, but lions are fine, bears are fine, but tigers no. Anyway, but yeah, he had a mangled hand, and literally he was like it sounded like it was getting infected and bad and gross. Yeah. And the doctor's like, you're gonna die if this doesn't start healing. And he tries to commit suicide. And somehow he survives this suicide attempt.
And his hand recovers.
He's fine. I forget. Gareth is like, this is the only time in history where someone shoots themselves in the head and their hand gets better. Yeah. It doesn't even make any sense.
Okay. So yeah, he tried to commit suicide. He once released wolves on people in a meeting. This was maybe the leading element of it. Cy liked to drink. Apparently that was a thing that people knew. At one point, a world famous boxer came to him and wanted to buy some lions to train with, because that's how you do things in the late 1800s is you fight a lion and then you can definitely fight a guy, right? Makes sense. But he couldn't make the meeting because he was knocked insensible by 3 elks. He
So, okay, there's been a lot of excuses for people why they don't make a meeting or why they can't make an appointment. I think this may be the only time in history that a dude's excuse was, I was knocked insensible by 3 elks.
Yes, accurate. Yeah, so basically his entire premise is if something was wrong with the animals, he would get in there and start punching them until it fixed itself.
Exactly.
And so he broke up hyena fights, lion fights. There was
what he said. They said that when the lions were howling because their babies had been taken away, again, horrible things that happen at old timey zoos.
Yes, no, it's very Joe
and so
Exotic.
what he does is he takes freaking shotguns and shoots it in the air to like, shut up, freaking lions. It's just
no, and then one of the lions like
everything.
mauled somebody, and they're like, "Oh, how could this happen?" It's like, "Oh, how did this happen?" Weird. Maybe my favorite part of Cy's whole thing, because it's like less just completely damaging, but it actually is what ends up getting him in trouble for the last time, is what they called mashers. So apparently this
is what I was
pervasive.
talking about earlier with people fondling each other at the zoo, because apparently this is just what people did back then.
I guess
Again, people are just bored.
And right around the turn of the 19th or the 20th century, right around 1900, apparently people were just mashing, which means just pervy, gross dudes just grabbing women at the zoo. And apparently this became enough of a problem that they were having to call the police all the time. And Cy's like, this is stupid. I'm wasting time. And he literally wrote a piece about how he would deal with mashers. And he's like, I give them 2 to 3 swift jabs, and then I kick him out of the zoo. Like literally, he would watch them. He's
like, I'm not calling the police. I'm just punching these guys in the face and kicking them out.
Yeah,
like,
he would literally watch you, and he's like, that person looks like a masher. And then he would watch them, and if they inappropriately touch someone, he would grab them, he would punch them several times, and he'd throw them out of the zoo. So that was his version of justice. But yeah, then he had orangutans with racist names and was sued by Ireland.
Oh, yeah, I forgot he was sued by the whole country of Ireland for the racist names. Oh, yeah. God.
It's all just ridiculous.
And for the record, I don't think we need to say this, but we don't agree that people of Irish descent look like orangutans.
No, I don't agree with any of the premises that Cy Devry had in general. I think I could say that hardline stance. I don't think there's anything I agree with this guy on in the world, but it is a ridiculous moment in time. And this show really highlights the crazy elements here, because you have the start of civilization. You know, you have print media, you have all of these things that are going to start to get the wheels turning on progress and things like that, but it hasn't happened yet. And so you get this weird moment where you have a guy that's doing things that would be horrifying in the current context, but it was just kind of celebrated there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole piece, again, the paper did, of Cy Devry with Billy Sunday, who at the time was an ex-baseball player, now evangelist.
Yep, he was a huge evangelist.
Who was, oh God. And I did you find a picture of this, Zach?
I don't know where they had this picture. I'll look real quick.
Because, okay, I'll give you a word picture right now. Apparently there was pythons that he had. Was it pythons or anacondas? Anyway, giant snakes that hadn't eaten in months. Like they were refused to eat. So he found, probably in a magazine or a paper, that there was this device called a feeding gun. So it was a gun that you could shoot food with. And he's like, I want that, and I'll feed my snakes with it.
Yeah, they were starving themselves, essentially. Oh, I think I found this.
So he bought this feeding gun to feed these snakes. And I think one of the stories is they shot 50 pounds of meat into a snake in one sitting. Like,
oh God. Yeah, it's pretty messed up looking. I'll throw the link in here for everybody who wants to look at it. It's not actually disturbing, but it's page 15 of this document. And yeah, it's essentially like 12 guys holding a snake, and there's just like a crank at the end, and Billy Sunday is just there ready to crank 50 pounds of meat down to anaconda not eating.
That, by the way, that is a huge, ginormous snake. I mean, that is a big snake. Let That's what she said. And it looks like a meat grinder. That is disturbing. That's yeah.
Oh,
So
okay. Did you notice the title of this paper? This is the Chicago Daily Tribune, 1872. Billy Sunday proves snakes have no terrors for him.
what? What's that even mean?
I don't know. He's got 15 dudes holding a snake and he's not scared of it, I guess, is the premise.
Here's Evangelist driving pounds of sausage meat into monster reptile, formerly of India, but now of the Lincoln Park Zoo.
Driving pounds of sausage meat. That's
driving pounds of sausage meat.
It's all terrible, but
into monster reptile.
But the show is amazing, and even the kind of the quick points we dropped in here, it is not enough. Go check out this episode of the Dollop. It was so good. We were laughing the whole time. You kind of is that same feeling of Tiger King, where you're just like, how is this real life? Like, what is happening? Each story just gets more and more ridiculous. I just really love this episode. It was a great one.
Yeah, and it was definitely fun. Definitely fun to listen to. Yeah, it was you didn't overhype it last week. It was definitely a good discovery and an interesting story. And now I'm glad, and I feel like I'm a better person having known about Cy Devry.
I'm a different person.
Yeah. Well, you got to learn from people's mistakes, so you never make those mistakes. Now I know that you don't punch a bear in the head, and I also know that you don't jump into a cage with fighting elks. See, I'm a better person.
Lessons
now. I didn't
learned.
know that before.
Yeah, now you know.
All right, so that brings us to this week's recommendation. I have a new one that I found, and oh God, honestly, I wish that Josh was still on the show because I think he would love this one so much. It's a show that's about the internet, specifically the Darknet. It's called Darknet Diaries. And I'm going to recommend episode 82, Master of Pwn.
Master of Pwn.
Yep, and it's PWN for those that are not internet people. Here's a quick synopsis of the episode. The 0 Day Initiative runs a hacker contest called Pwn to Own. The contest calls the best hackers in the world to demonstrate they can hack into software that should be secure, like browsers, phones, and even cars. A lot of vulnerabilities are discovered from this event, which means vendors must fix them. Whoever can demonstrate the most vulnerabilities will be crowned the master of Pwn. And it's definitely an interesting story about hacking, but also like almost in, because this isn't like, oh God, they're going to like destroy this company. They're trying to find vulnerabilities, and then there's companies that try to make sure that, let's say, Apple or Microsoft fix these vulnerabilities for people like you and me that are using the software. So there's a company that will literally, I mean, I guess we'll talk about it next week, but they'll pay people for the vulnerabilities, for the hacks, and then they will go to Microsoft, be like, hey, there's an issue with this. You have 120 days to fix it. When those 120 days are up, if you haven't fixed it, we're going to release to the world that there is what do they call it?
Vulnerability,
that there's a vulnerability on this specific thing, and then you're going to have to fix it. So it's an interesting thing to kind of like help the consumers in a way, because, you know, half the time we don't know, and these big companies, they don't care half the time, but these companies try to help consumers like us. So yeah, it's called Darknet Diaries, episode 82, Master of Pwn.
Thank
you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We would love for you to get in touch. We have a Facebook group called the Podcast Discovery Club, and our Twitter is @thepdsofficial. We also record the show live every Friday night at 8 o'clock on Twitch. We would love for you to be part of the show while we're recording it.
If you want to support the show, we have a number of ways you can do that. From our Patreon to our affiliate links, they're always linked in the show notes. In the end, you support the show just by listening, and it means the world to us. So thank you so much for being a part of our journey.